There is a kind of person who can spend an entire weekend alone, no plans, no visitors, no noise from another human being, and arrive on Monday morning genuinely rested, not resigned, not numb, not pretending. Actually, quietly, completely fine. And when someone asks how their weekend was, they'll say good and mean it, even though, by most external measures, nothing happened. And the person asking will nod politely and feel, somewhere underneath the nodding, a faint concern because what kind of person is okay with that? Psychology has a very specific answer to that question. And it has very little to do with shyness, social anxiety, or any of the other explanations people reach for when someone turns out to be comfortable alone in a way they themselves are not. The self-sufficient introvert is not someone who has made peace with isolation. They are someone for whom solitude is not a state of deprivation at all. It is a state of supply. Their inner world generates something thought, connection, engagement, meaning that most people can only access when the outer world is providing it. And because that generation is happening internally, the presence or absence of external stimulation changes almost nothing about whether they feel engaged with their own existence. This is not a small difference. It is a fundamental one. And it produces a profile that looks, from the outside, like someone who has simply given up on connection. It is not that at all. Think about what happens when a person who needs external stimulation is left alone with no plans, no devices, no input. The absence of external engagement registers in the brain as emptiness. Nothing is happening. The mind, waiting for something to engage with, finds nothing and generates restlessness. Boredom is not the experience of time passing slowly. It is the experience of a mind that requires external input to feel alive, suddenly deprived of it. It is a neurological state, not a character flaw. Now think about the self-sufficient introvert in the same conditions. The external environment goes quiet, and the internal environment, which has been running this whole time underneath the noise of daily life, expands into the space that's been created. Thoughts that were interrupted mid-development resume. Questions that were set aside because there was no time to follow them begin to move forward again. Connections between ideas that were forming slowly start to crystallize. There is, for this person, no emptiness to fill. The silence is not absence. It is a room. Research on what psychologists call the default mode network, the constellation of brain regions that activate during internally focused thought, shows that people who report high satisfaction with solitude demonstrate elevated baseline activity in this network even at rest. Their brains, in other words, are not waiting for something to happen. They are already happening, already processing, associating, generating. The engine doesn't require external fuel in the same way. It runs on its own. This is also why social interaction, even when genuinely enjoyable, carries a cost for this kind of person that it doesn't carry for someone who is externally oriented. When you are engaging outwardly tracking another person's thoughts, responding in real time, managing the social dynamics of a conversation, you have to interrupt the internal processing that was already in motion. You have to redirect attention from the inward movement to the outward one. And while this can be worth doing, and often is, it is a reallocation of resources. You are pausing one kind of engagement to participate in another. And when you return to solitude afterward, there is something that functions almost like relief, not because the interaction was bad, but because the internal current can now resume unimpeded. If this is landing somewhere familiar in you, take a moment to like the video. It helps more people find conversations like this one. And if understanding the quieter, more interior dimensions of human psychology is something you want more of, subscribing makes this work possible. Because what nobody tells the self-sufficient introvert, certainly not when they are young, is that the capacity they have is real. It is not a coping mechanism. It is not compensation for something lacking in their social life. It is a genuine cognitive orientation, as real and as valid as its opposite, with its own advantages and its own specific costs. The advantages are not small. Research on creative output and solitary reflection, consistently finds that the kind of thinking that produces original ideas, the associative, non-linear, following a thread until it leads, somewhere unexpected kind, requires uninterrupted internal time to develop. Synthesis, which is what happens when disparate pieces of information combine into something new, cannot be rushed or crowded. It needs quiet and duration and the freedom to move at its own pace. Many of the most significant intellectual and creative contributions in human history came from people who spent very long stretches inside their own minds. Not because isolation is a prerequisite for insight, but because certain depths of thought require the kind of sustained, undivided attention that social environments structurally cannot provide. The self-sufficient introvert is, almost by definition, someone with access to that kind of attention. They can go deep in a way that requires no external permission or participation. This is not incidental to how they function. It is the engine of how they function. The specific cost, though, and there is one, is the chronic experience of being misread, of having a genuine preference interpreted as a wound, of having contentment interpreted as denial, of being asked, over and over in various forms, "What is wrong with you?" not aggressively, but with the quiet concern of someone who genuinely cannot reconcile your apparent okayness with their own understanding of what okayness requires. There is a particular kind of social tax that self-sufficient introverts pay that almost never gets named. When asked about their weekend, they perform a rapid internal calculation. How much of the truth is socially acceptable here? They learn that, "I spent most of it alone, and it was genuinely good," reads as either a cry for help or an indictment of the questioner's values, so they edit. They make the weekend sound busier than it was. They leave out the part where the best hour of their week was reading in total silence on Sunday afternoon with nobody needing anything from them. They learn to translate their interior life into a language that doesn't alarm the people asking about it. And the irony embedded in all of this, the paradox worth sitting with, is that the self-sufficient introvert is often one of the most relationally capable people in any room. Not because they are warm by performance or sociable by habit, but because the same internal orientation that makes them comfortable alone also makes them unusually good at depth when they choose to engage. They listen fully. They think before speaking. They are interested in ideas rather than social positioning. They have, through years of rich interior conversation, developed a relationship with complexity that allows them to meet other people in it without flinching. The quality of their connection, when they offer it, tends to be different from connection that is maintained through frequency alone. They don't need to talk every day to feel close to someone. They don't require constant contact as proof that a relationship is real. What they require is depth when the contact happens, and they are usually capable of providing it precisely because they bring something to the conversation that wasn't generated by the conversation itself. This means they are selectively present rather than continuously available. And the people who matter to them, the ones who don't need the relationship to feel like a constant low hum in the background of daily life, tend to find that selectivity is actually a form of quality. The self-sufficient introvert is not half present when they're with you. They're entirely present because they've chosen to be. And choice, freely made, is its own kind of signal. Here is what the self-sufficient introvert deserves to hear, stated plainly and without qualification. The version of a full life that requires constant external engagement is one version. It is not the only version. It is not the better version. It is simply the more visible one, the one the culture produces and recognizes and rewards, and the one that makes you feel, at various points in your life, like you were doing something wrong by not needing it. You were not doing something wrong. You were operating with a different internal architecture, one that generates meaning from within, rather than importing it from outside, that replenishes through stillness rather than through stimulus, that finds company in its own movement rather than requiring a body across the room. The people who never run out of things to think about are not avoiding the world, they carry the world. And the fact that its interior doesn't make it less real, less rich, or less worth inhabiting. It makes it For the right kind of mind, more than enough. Solitude is not what they endure between connections. It is where they actually live, and they have, after all this time, finally made it home. Is there a version of your life you've always edited out because it seemed like too much to explain? And what would it look like to stop translating it for people who haven't asked hard enough? The fact that you watched this far means something about you. You are someone who wants to understand, not just move on. Hit the like and subscribe button. I'll see you in the next one.